Hey guys, tonight we step into the narrow, uneven sidewalks of South Philadelphia, where the smell of fresh bread from corner bakeries mixes with the exhaust of idling Cadillacs, and where boys grow up watching the quiet men who don't clock in anywhere, yet seem to pay every bill. The air is thick with summer heat, but it's the tension you notice more. The way neighbors look away when certain names are spoken. Somewhere in this neighborhood, a young man with sharp eyes behind thick glasses is already learning that survival here isn't about who's loudest, but who knows when to keep quiet. And just so you know, in a world where debts are called in ways you can't Google, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you listening from tonight, and what's your local time? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. He's not much to look at in those early years. Thin, bookish in a neighborhood that prizes broad shoulders and quick fists. Born into the rhythms of South Philly's Italian-American quarter, Harry Riccobene learns early that you don't need size to command respect. His father, a man who worked hard but never seemed to get ahead, passes down a certain stoicism, though Harry also inherits a quiet, stubborn streak that will later define his reputation. The streets around him are a classroom where nobody hands out diplomas. He sees the older boys run errands for corner bookmakers, carry mysterious envelopes to bars where grown men speak in low voices. He notices who walks free after a police sweep and who doesn't come back. Even as a teenager, Harry understands there's a structure here, an invisible architecture of favors, debts, and unwritten rules. And he starts mapping it in his mind. His thick-lensed glasses become a neighborhood trademark, earning him the nickname that will follow him for decades: the Glasses. Some say it's affectionate, others think it's mocking, but Harry doesn't mind. It's better to be remembered for something, even if it's your spectacles, than to blend into the background and be forgotten. He wears them like a badge, never hiding the fact that his vision isn't perfect, because in truth, the eyes behind them see more than most. Money at home is tight, and like most kids in the neighborhood, he picks up whatever work he can, delivering groceries, sweeping out storefronts, running packages, jobs that pay little but teach him who can be trusted with change and who'll short you a dime. He develops a habit of counting his steps on each errand, a strange, quiet discipline that keeps his mind sharp. Years later, he'll say that habit made him good at remembering routes, whether to a butcher shop or to a back alley meeting where no one's supposed to see you arrive. The mid-century South Philly of his youth is a place where the American dream feels close enough to touch, but always seems to belong to someone else. Many families here arrived from Sicily or Naples with nothing, and though they've built businesses and bought homes, opportunity is still rationed by who you know. Harry sees men who seem to have more, better suits, newer cars, no punch clock, but he also notices the way they avoid lingering under streetlights, how they keep their voices low when certain subjects come up. One afternoon, while delivering bread to a small cafe, he watches as a sharply dressed man slides an envelope across the table to the owner, who tucks it away without a word. The man nods at Harry, a flicker of acknowledgement in his eyes, and for the first time, Harry feels the pull of that other world. It isn't about the money in that envelope. It's about the unspoken understanding between men who live by rules no outsider can see. At home, his mother warns him about bad company, but Harry isn't looking to be reckless. He's curious. He wants to know how things work, why certain men are respected without having to shout, and why the police seem to drive past without stopping when those men gather on a corner. That curiosity becomes a quiet obsession. By the time he's 17, Harry has a mental map of who controls which blocks, which bars are safe to drink in, and which alleys lead to trouble. He knows where to walk quickly and where to slow down and be seen. Without meaning to, he's apprenticing himself to the neighborhood's unspoken hierarchy, not by taking orders, but by observing everything. It's in these years that his sense of patience is forged. Harry sees young men rush into trouble, eager to prove themselves, only to end up in jail or worse. He learns to wait, to watch, to let opportunities ripen. This restraint will serve him later, when the stakes are higher than a missed paycheck. One night, while walking home past the corner candy store, he hears raised voices inside. Two men are arguing, their tones low but sharp, and though he can't catch every word, the tension is unmistakable. When one of them storms out, Harry notices the man's face, an older neighborhood figure known for running card games. The next day, word spreads quietly. Someone in the candy store owes more than they can pay. Harry files it away, another lesson in how debts in this world are rarely forgiven in cash alone. For now, he's just the boy with the glasses, moving through South Philly's streets like any other kid. But under that quiet exterior, the mind of a future player is already awake, absorbing the rhythms and the risks, the little tells and the big moves. In a city that will one day erupt into mob warfare, these early years are laying the foundation for a man who will navigate it all on his own terms. Harry grows into his late teens without losing that lean frame or the ever-present glasses, but the way people regard him starts to shift. By now, his habit of watching without interrupting has earned him a reputation as someone who notices things others miss. That makes him useful in ways that have nothing to do with muscle. In South Philly, information is currency, and Harry learns how to spend it sparingly. His eyesight might be flawed, but his perception is sharp. He's the kid who remembers when a certain sedan shows up twice on the same block in one afternoon. He can recall which butcher slipped an extra cut into the paper for a customer who left through the back door. These details don't seem important in isolation, but together they form a map of quiet connections. The men who live in the shadows appreciate that kind of mind, even if they don't say so out loud. Harry's nickname, the Glasses, stops being just a casual jab. It becomes a mark of identity, a shorthand in backroom conversations. The kid with the glasses saw him, someone might say, and everyone will know exactly who they mean. It's a strange kind of fame, public enough to be recognized, private enough to keep him out of the gossip mill. The first real step into the underworld comes in the form of errands for older acquaintances. These aren't just deliveries, they're tests. He's asked to carry sealed envelopes between bars, to pass along brief, vague messages, or to walk into a store and leave without buying anything. No one explains the purpose, and Harry doesn't ask. That's part of the test, knowing when not to ask. Some of these tasks are benign, others less so. He notices patterns in the timing, like how certain deliveries happen only on Fridays, or how the envelopes feel thicker at the end of the month. He doesn't count the money. He never would. But he understands that the contents aren't meant for curious eyes. This ability to keep his head down and his mouth shut becomes one of his defining skills. By his early 20s, Harry is quietly earning more from these small errands than from any straight job he's had. He still helps out at a neighborhood print shop, setting type and cleaning presses, But the real value is in the contacts he makes. The shop becomes a kind of neutral ground. Men stop by under the pretense of placing orders, but the real exchanges happen in coded conversation over the counter. Harry hears more than he says, storing away every scrap of insight like loose change in a jar. One afternoon, an older figure named Tony Marino, broad-shouldered, soft-spoken, but unmistakably influential, pulls him aside after a delivery. Tony tells him he's been reliable, a word that means more in this world than any title. Reliability is the first step toward trust, and trust can lead to doors opening that most people never even see. Harry doesn't rush through that door. He lingers in the threshold, watching how others move through the ranks. The brash ones burn out fast, drawing attention with flashy cars or loud tempers. The quiet operators, the ones who keep to the back corners and let others do the boasting, seem to last the longest. Harry decides he'll model himself after the latter. He keeps his personal life modest. A small apartment, plain clothes, a car that doesn't attract attention. In a city where image can be everything, he cultivates invisibility. The glasses help. People underestimate him at first glance, and he doesn't correct them. There's a story that circulates from this period. Harry is sent to meet a man in a diner to exchange an envelope for a package. When he arrives, the man is sitting with a stranger. Harry doesn't say a word. He orders coffee, waits until the stranger leaves, and only then completes the handoff. Later, Tony Marino hears about this and nods approvingly. It's not just the job. It's knowing when the conditions aren't right. In these years, Harry also begins to understand the subtler rules of the neighborhood. The mob isn't just about money or territory, it's about respect. A careless word, an ignored handshake, can cause more trouble than a missing payment. He learns to greet the right people, to step aside for certain men on the sidewalk, to always acknowledge the presence of an elder with a nod. These courtesies cost nothing, but can buy a kind of insurance against misunderstandings. By the late 1950s, Harry's name is quietly known beyond his immediate block. He's not a made man, not yet, but he's with certain people, close enough to be under their informal protection. This doesn't make him invincible, but it does make others think twice before crossing him. The funny thing is, he still works part-time at the print shop. He likes the routine, the smell of ink, the hum of the presses. It's a place where he can spend hours without worrying about who's watching. The legitimate job gives him cover, but it also gives him something the street never can. A sense of steady rhythm. Through it all, he remains patient. There are opportunities to move faster, to take on riskier work for bigger paydays, but Harry declines more than he accepts. He's building a foundation, and foundations aren't laid in haste. It's this patience, combined with an almost invisible presence, that will one day allow him to move through some of the bloodiest years in Philadelphia mob history without getting buried by them. For now, he's content to be the kid with the glasses, who always gets the job done, never loses an envelope, and never repeats a conversation he's overheard. Harry's 20s stretch on, and with each year, his network deepens. The streets around South Philly feel like a living organism to him now, breathing, shifting, reacting to small changes. He knows the heartbeat of the neighborhood, when it's calm, when it's tense, and when something's brewing just out of sight. This awareness is no accident. It's the product of long hours spent lingering at corners, leaning against walls outside cafes, and walking the same routes over and over. until he can tell when a familiar face is missing. The small-time work evolves. Instead of simply ferrying envelopes or packages, Harry is now asked to mind certain spots, keeping an eye on a particular block, or watching who comes and goes from a bar. It's not glamorous work, but it places him at the edges of bigger operations. He starts to recognize the patterns of numbers rackets, the signs of a Shylock working a debtor, and the quiet rhythm of payoffs. One summer night, he sits at a corner table in a narrow diner, drinking coffee so slowly it's almost cold, while across the street, a backroom poker game runs longer than usual. Just before dawn, the players drift out one by one, but Harry notices the last man leaving slips a folded slip of paper into the pocket of a waiting cab driver. He files it away. The next day, word comes down that a local cop has been transferred without warning. Cause and effect are rarely so obvious, but Harry is starting to see how invisible lines connect everything. Around this time, his relationship with Tony Marino shifts from casual acquaintance to something closer to mentorship. Tony isn't just a man in the life. He's a bridge to the old guard, men who came up in the days when Angelo Bruno was still just another figure trying to make his name. Tony shares bits of history over coffee: who was loyal, who turned, which deals shaped the current map of power. Harry listens more than he speaks, but now he's occasionally asked what he thinks. That's a sign. He learns that knowledge in this world isn't just about knowing who's who. It's about understanding who was who and who they might become. A man's standing can shift overnight, and the ability to predict those shifts is priceless. Harry's sharpness, disguised behind those thick lenses, makes him valuable in ways even he doesn't fully grasp yet. The money from his side work is steady now, enough that he could abandon the print shop entirely. But Harry keeps showing up, sweeping floors, sorting type, and manning the front counter. The shop is a perfect alibi, and besides, he likes the anonymity. The truth is, he enjoys being underestimated. People are more open when they think you're just the quiet guy folding paper in the back. It's at the shop that he first encounters a different sort of task, one that feels less like an errand and more like an initiation. A man he's seen only in passing comes in, orders a stack of personalized stationery, and leaves a small envelope with the order. The next morning, another man, completely unrelated, picks it up. Inside, Harry suspects, is nothing anyone would write a letter on. No one says a word, and the transaction is so clean, it might as well be a ghost passing through. By the early 1960s, Harry has built a kind of quiet resume. Dependable, discreet, and patient. These qualities don't go unnoticed, and he finds himself in rooms where men discuss deals worth more than he's ever held in his hands. He doesn't speak unless spoken to, but he observes every detail: who interrupts whom, who pours the drinks, who leans back and lets others talk. Power, he sees, is often in the posture. It's during this period that he witnesses his first real sit-down, a meeting between two men who've been feuding over a territory dispute. Harry isn't directly involved. He's there to deliver a small item to one of the attendees, but he ends up waiting in the back room while the conversation unfolds. The tension is like a taut wire, every word measured, every pause heavy. When they finally shake hands, Harry understands something crucial. In this world, words can carry as much weight as bullets, and sometimes they're more dangerous. Outside of work, Harry keeps his personal life almost aggressively quiet. A few girlfriends come and go, but nothing serious. He spends evenings reading the paper at his kitchen table, keeping up on both the crime blotter and the political news. He knows that city politics and organized crime are like two rivers running side by side, sometimes merging, sometimes diverting, but always influencing each other. One night, over a plate of spaghetti at a dimly lit restaurant, Tony Marino tells him a story about an older mobster who once said, "You can't buy loyalty, but you can rent it if you pay on time." Harry laughs quietly, but he knows the truth behind the joke. Payment, whether in money, favors, or respect, has to be punctual. He files this away with the rest of his lessons. By the time Harry turns 30, he's carved out a small but sturdy place in the underworld's architecture. He's not making headlines, he's not being chased by cops, and he's not drawing envy from peers. That's exactly how he likes it. For him, the game isn't about shining in the spotlight. It's about surviving long enough to still be playing when others are gone. Harry's 30s arrive without much fanfare. He doesn't throw parties, doesn't make loud purchases, and doesn't post up in the flashier clubs where some of the younger wise guys like to be seen. Instead, he sharpens the skill he values most, making himself both present and invisible. By now, he's the man you might remember seeing at the edge of a room, nodding politely, never interrupting, and somehow knowing exactly when to leave before trouble starts. The influence of the old guard still shapes him. Men like Tony Marino are careful, deliberate, and allergic to unnecessary risk. Tony has survived because he understands that loyalty isn't blind. It's a choice you renew every day. Harry takes this lesson to heart, especially as the landscape of Philadelphia's underworld begins to shift under Angelo Bruno's leadership. Bruno's reputation for being diplomatic, avoiding unnecessary violence, and keeping the city relatively stable filters down to everyone, and Harry thrives in that kind of climate. His role starts to expand in subtle ways. Now he's sometimes asked to be there when money changes hands, not to enforce or intimidate, but to witness. In the mob, a witness is more than a pair of eyes. He's a guarantee that the terms agreed upon will be remembered the same way by everyone later. Harry is perfect for this. Calm, unflappable, and trustworthy. One autumn afternoon, he's called to a meeting in the back of a bar on Passyunk Avenue. Two mid-level earners are settling a dispute over an unpaid debt. Harry sits at the corner table, nursing a seltzer, letting the others talk. When the matter is resolved, without raised voices or threats, one of the men turns to Harry and says, "We good?" Harry nods once. It's enough. His nod becomes a kind of seal, a quiet stamp of approval that everyone accepts. But even in Bruno's relatively peaceful reign, the city has undercurrents. Harry starts to hear whispers about ambitious younger guys who don't think diplomacy is strength. They see it as weakness, and they're eager to prove themselves in bloodier ways. Harry keeps his ear to the ground, but doesn't get drawn into the debates. He knows better than to pick sides before the lines are fully drawn. He also begins to develop relationships outside the immediate mob circle. Bartenders, taxi drivers, market vendors. These aren't formal connections, but they're valuable. A cabbie might mention which regular fare has been making late-night trips to an unfamiliar neighborhood. A bartender might casually note that a certain man is drinking more than usual. Harry tucks each piece away, never pressing for more than what's offered. People talk when they're comfortable, not when they're interrogated. In his personal life, Harry keeps his world small. He rents a modest apartment not far from where he grew up, keeps his wardrobe functional, good shoes, clean shirts, nothing flashy. The most expensive thing he owns is a well-made overcoat, which he justifies as a necessity for Philadelphia winters. There's a night in 1965 when he's invited to a gathering at a local social club. It's a mix of mob associates, neighborhood businessmen, and a few politicians who know better than to ask too many questions about each other's income sources. Harry spends most of the night listening, but at one point, a city councilman leans in and says, "I hear you're the kind of man who remembers the little things." Harry only smiles and shrugs, but he files the comment away. It means his reputation is reaching places he hadn't considered. Over time, he notices something. The men who seem most secure in their positions often talk the least about them. This reinforces his decision to remain reserved. Let others chase glory. Harry's chasing longevity. A turning point comes when an older associate entrusts him with managing a small but steady numbers route. It's not a glamorous job, but it puts Harry in direct contact with both customers and collectors. He learns to read the mood of a block by the way people place their bets. More optimism means bigger wagers. Bad local news means smaller ones. This sensitivity to the neighborhood's emotional temperature becomes one of his quiet advantages. Occasionally, he's present when the higher-ups meet, not as an active participant, but as part of the trusted background. He observes how Bruno diffuses tension with calm logic, how disputes are often framed in terms of mutual benefit rather than dominance. Harry admires this approach. It keeps the peace and, more importantly, keeps the law's spotlight dimmed, still. He knows peace in this world is never permanent. The younger generation is restless, and while Harry avoids unnecessary conflict, he's realistic enough to know that the day will come when even he will have to choose a side. For now, though, he moves through the streets with the quiet assurance of someone who knows his place and how to keep it. By the early 1970s, Harry's reputation for steadiness has become his most valuable currency. In a city where tempers can flare faster than a summer storm, he remains unshakable, the man who doesn't rattle, even when the conversation turns sharp. It's a quality that earns him small but significant responsibilities, and it keeps his name in good standing with Angelo Bruno himself, even if the two men don't meet often. The truth is, Bruno's style of leadership suits Harry perfectly. Under Bruno, Philadelphia's mob avoids the kind of reckless bloodletting that ruins fortunes and draws headlines. The money flows, the streets are relatively calm, and disputes are resolved in back rooms instead of alleys. For Harry, this stability is a gift. It allows him to operate quietly, to build relationships without having to constantly guard his back from sudden upheaval. Around this time, his work shifts from simple observation to subtle mediation. He's asked to pass along messages that are less about logistics and more about tone. Reminders to keep tempers cool, suggestions to reconsider certain moves. Harry understands the delicate nature of these tasks. Delivering a message isn't just about the words. It's about the timing, the setting, and the way you look a man in the eye when you say it. One winter afternoon, he's told to meet a man named Lou Little Hands at a coffee shop in South Philly. The message is simple. Bruno wants Lou to ease off pressing a certain debtor, but Harry knows the wrong phrasing could turn it into an insult. So, over steaming mugs, he frames it as a strategic move. You'll get more out of him if you let him breathe a bit. Lou nods, and just like that, the situation cools without anyone losing face. Harry starts to see how much of the life is built on these small negotiations. Violence, he realizes, is often a failure of communication, a last resort for men who've run out of ways to talk. Bruno's genius is in avoiding those failures, and Harry absorbs that lesson deeply. Still, the work has its shadows. Now and then, He's tasked with being present when debts are collected or when a man is told he's no longer welcome in certain circles. These moments are cold, transactional, and final. Harry never gloats, never taunts. He delivers the news or witnesses it, then steps aside. His ability to keep such encounters free of theatrics only strengthens his reputation. His network outside the mob also grows during this period. He maintains casual friendships with dock workers, mechanics, and even a few beat cops. These aren't deep alliances, but they're useful. A mechanic might mention a certain Cadillac has been in the shop more than usual. A dock worker might note an unusual shipment arriving under cover of night. Harry listens, nods, and keeps the information for when it might matter. There's a night when Bruno himself makes a rare appearance at a gathering Harry attends. The Don's presence changes the air in the room, quieter, more deliberate. Bruno speaks softly, yet everyone leans in. At one point, his gaze passes over Harry, and he gives the slightest nod. It's not an invitation, not a direct acknowledgement, but Harry understands its meaning. You're in the room because you belong here. The more he sees of Bruno's operation, the more Harry appreciates its balance. Money is made steadily, territory is respected, and unnecessary enemies are avoided. In a world where greed can be a death sentence, restraint is the true luxury. Harry adopts this philosophy as his own. In his private life, he continues to keep things simple. A modest apartment, a small rotation of good suits, the same coffee shop each morning. He reads the paper religiously, noting not just the headlines, but the absences, stories that aren't told, crimes that go unreported. Sometimes, the silence says more than the ink. By the mid-70s, Harry is no longer just the kid with the glasses. He's a trusted figure in the background of significant deals, a man whose opinion might be sought quietly, even by those higher up the ladder. He doesn't mistake this for power. Real power is something he's still careful not to grasp too tightly. But influence? That's something he can hold without it burning his hands. Looking back years later, he'll recognize this period as the calm before the storm. But at the time, all he knows is that the streets feel steady, the money is good, and the city's underworld is held together by the quiet authority of a Don who values peace. For Harry Riccobene, it's the perfect environment to sharpen his instincts and deepen his roots, without yet realizing how violently those roots will be tested. The calm begins to fray in ways that aren't obvious at first. It's the late 1970s now, and while Bruno still holds the city in a steady grip, the undercurrents are shifting. Younger men, ambitious, impatient, are starting to view the old diplomacy as outdated. Harry can sense it in the tone of conversations, the shorter tempers in sit-downs, the way a few mid-level earners start boasting about ventures that once would have been kept quiet. Harry doesn't change his rhythm. He still walks the same routes, keeps the same morning coffee routine, and handles his errands with the same deliberate pace. But he sharpens his awareness. He starts listening not only to what's being said, but to the words men avoid. When talk about certain crews becomes deliberately vague, Harry knows it's not caution, it's tension. One night, over dinner in a dim-lit restaurant on Snyder Avenue, Tony Marino leans toward him and says, "These young guys, they want to run before they can walk, and when they fall, they're taking people with them." Harry nods, saying nothing, but the warning lodges deep. He's seen enough to know that reckless ambition is contagious. By now, his place in the network is solid. He's more than a messenger. He's a quiet strategist, the man a few trusted figures will consult, before deciding whether to push forward or step back. It's not formal power, but it's influence all the same. Bruno's camp values him as a stabilizing presence, someone who can absorb tension instead of inflaming it. Still, the cracks widen. There's a crew out of Atlantic City making noise about expanding into Philly rackets without asking permission. In the past, such a move would have been met with swift but measured pushback. Now, Bruno's measured response is drawing criticism from the impatient faction. Harry hears the rumblings. He's too soft. He's past his time. Harry keeps his personal stance hidden. He respects Bruno's approach, but he knows tides can't be held back forever. His plan, as always, is to navigate the shift without becoming collateral damage. One winter afternoon, he's asked to sit in on a quiet meeting between two captains debating control over a lucrative vending machine route. It's tense, but civil, until one of the younger soldiers makes an offhand crack about old men with their old ways. Harry watches Bruno's captain absorb the insult without reacting. Later, in the hallway, the captain mutters to Harry, "Kid thinks he's got 9 lives. We'll see how many he's got left come summer." That's the moment Harry knows the temperature is rising. He doesn't seek to expand his role during this turbulence. Instead, he doubles down on discretion. The more the atmosphere thickens with distrust, the less he speaks. He avoids being seen too often with any single faction, careful to keep his movements varied. In his line of work, consistency in demeanor is more valuable than consistency in alliances. Meanwhile, his connections outside the mob world keep feeding him small but telling pieces of information. A bartender notes that a certain mid-level earner is suddenly tipping big, which usually means he's flush from an unapproved score. A market vendor tells Harry that a familiar car has been idling across the street from his stall for 3 nights running. Harry doesn't pass these observations along casually. He chooses who needs to know and when. Bruno himself remains outwardly calm, moving through the city with the same understated confidence he's always had. But Harry notices something new in the Don's eyes, an awareness that his brand of leadership is being questioned, even if not yet openly challenged. It's a subtle shift, but for a man like Harry, subtle shifts are alarms. He begins to think about contingency plans. Not betrayal. Harry isn't wired that way, but positioning. Making sure that no matter which way the wind blows, he can claim a corner of shelter. It's not about loyalty or disloyalty. It's about survival. For now, the streets still hum under Bruno's steady hand, but the notes are changing. And in the back of Harry's mind, he knows that when this melody finally breaks, it won't be a gentle fade. It will be a violent snap. The breaking point comes faster than anyone expects. March of 1980, the news spreads like a shockwave. Angelo Bruno has been shot dead, execution style, while sitting in his car outside his home. No warning, no grand spectacle, just a clean, sudden end to nearly 2 decades of quiet rule. For most of Philadelphia, it's an abrupt headline. For men like Harry Riccobene, it's the sound of a dam cracking. Harry hears about it before it hits the morning papers. A call comes in late that night. No details, just the flat statement. He's gone. He hangs up, sits at his kitchen table in silence, and lets the reality sink in. Bruno's steady hand, the shield that's kept Philadelphia from turning into another New York-style battlefield, has been ripped away. By dawn, the streets are humming with theories. Who ordered it? Who stood to gain? Was it an internal betrayal or an outside job? Harry knows enough to recognize that every answer to those questions leads to blood. Without Bruno's diplomacy, old grievances and new ambitions will collide. In the first days after the killing, Harry stays in the background, observing. Funerals in this world are more than mourning. They're political gatherings. At Bruno's, Harry sees the shift in posture, the quick exchanges of glances, the quiet pairing off of men into whispered conversations. The old guard wear their grief openly, but the younger and hungrier keep their faces unreadable. Nicodemo, Little Nicky. Scarfo is the name that starts surfacing almost immediately in the wake of the chaos. Scarfo, long known for his hair-trigger temper and ruthless streak, isn't cut from Bruno's cloth. If he rises, Harry knows the city's going to run red. Scarfo's brand of leadership isn't about maintaining peace, it's about instilling fear. Harry has always avoided planting himself too firmly in one camp, but in this moment, neutrality feels like walking a tightrope over open fire. Alliances will be demanded, and sitting on the fence will make you a target from both sides. Still, he moves carefully, testing the waters before giving even the faintest sign of allegiance. One evening, he meets Tony Marino for a quiet dinner. The old mentor looks more worn than Harry's ever seen him. Over plates of veal and pasta, Tony lays it out. "We're heading into something bad. Pick your ground now, Harry, but make sure it's ground. You can walk off if you need to." Harry nods, knowing Tony's advice is worth more than any threat or promise coming from the loud voices in the streets. The weeks after Bruno's death bring an unsettling calm, like the air before a thunderstorm. No one moves openly, but beneath the surface, deals are being made, grudges revived, and lines drawn. Harry keeps his schedule irregular, avoids predictable patterns, and watches the faces of men he's known for years harden into something colder. One day at a corner cafe, a younger soldier leans over and says, "Times are changing, Glasses. You in or out?" Harry doesn't answer directly. "I'm still here," he says, his tone flat. It's the kind of answer that gives nothing away, yet keeps him in play. What unnerves Harry most is the shift in how disputes are handled. Under Bruno, disagreements were usually settled in conversation. Now, men are disappearing overnight, their absence explained with vague shrugs. Trust, always fragile in this life, becomes nearly non-existent. Harry understands that his skill set, patience, discretion, reading the undercurrent, might actually make him more valuable now than before. In Scarfo's world, hot tempers burn bridges quickly, and men who can move between factions without being seen as a direct threat are rare. The trick will be staying useful without becoming indispensable, because indispensable men are often the first to be removed when the new order consolidates power. As spring turns into summer, the tension finally starts to break into open conflict. Gunshots echo in neighborhoods that hadn't heard them in years, and the police are suddenly very visible, though they rarely seem to stop the right people. Harry knows the storm he feared has arrived, and this time, it isn't going to pass quickly. The summer of 1980 bleeds into a tense, restless autumn. The old boundaries Bruno kept so neatly intact start to blur, and the streets feel different. More eyes watching, more whispers cut short when someone walks into the room. Harry moves through it like a man crossing a frozen river, each step measured, knowing the wrong one could drop him into dark water. Nicodemo, Little Nicky. Scarfo isn't officially in charge yet, but his influence is unmistakable. Word spreads of his violent streak, of the message he's sending to anyone who thinks about crossing him. Fear will keep you in line. Scarfo's men make examples quickly. quiet disappearances, bodies found in ways that make the message plain without needing explanation. It's a sharp departure from Bruno's era, and Harry takes note of the change in tone. Harry understands that survival now means adapting without losing himself. He begins to operate in smaller circles, tightening his movements and limiting the people he speaks with regularly. Every conversation is weighed. What's safe to say? What's worth keeping locked away? He knows that in Scarfo's rising order, curiosity can be as dangerous as disrespect. One afternoon, he sits in a booth at a diner with Tony Marino. The place is half empty, a light drizzle streaking the windows, the kind of weather that makes the city feel smaller. Tony leans in, lowering his voice. These guys, they don't talk problems out. They solve them with a gun and a smile. Don't let that smile fool you. Harry nods. He's already noticed. In Scarfo's circle, charm and menace walk hand in hand. Harry's role shifts again, no longer just observing or passing quiet messages, but serving as a kind of informal scout. Trusted contacts ask what he's heard, where certain people have been seen, whether a rumor carries weight. He never deals in absolutes. He passes along fragments, enough to be useful without putting himself in a position where a wrong word can be traced back. He avoids Scarfo directly, not out of fear, but because he knows proximity to volatile men can be fatal. Instead, he maintains polite but distant ties, enough to show he's not an enemy, but never close enough to be mistaken for a loyalist. It's a delicate balance. Too much warmth, and you're owned. Too much coolness, and you're marked. The tension isn't confined to Philly. Harry hears murmurs of other cities watching closely, of New York crews quietly evaluating whether the Scarfo era will be an asset or a liability. That outside interest only adds to the pressure, because attention from larger families can be both an opportunity and a death sentence. One night, Harry walks home along Passyunk Avenue after a late meeting. The streets are slick from a passing rain, neon signs reflecting in puddles. A black sedan slows as it passes him, its headlights sweeping over him like a slow inspection. It keeps going, but the message is clear. Someone is taking stock of where he is and when. Back at his apartment, Harry sits with a cup of coffee gone cold, replaying the day's conversations. He's careful not to dwell on fear. Fear clouds judgment. Instead, he catalogs details, the shift in who's standing where at gatherings, the sudden appearance of faces he hasn't seen in years, the absence of others who once seemed permanent fixtures. Scarfo's shadow grows, and with it, the city's pulse quickens. Violence becomes less of a last resort and more of a common tool. For a man like Harry, whose instincts lean toward patience and subtlety, it's a dangerous climate. But it's also one where his quiet approach, low profile, high observation, might keep him standing when louder voices are silenced. By the year's end, Harry knows two things for certain. The Philadelphia underworld he's navigated for decades has been rewritten overnight, and the real test of survival is only just beginning. By early 1981, the mob in Philadelphia feels like a chessboard where the pieces keep changing sides overnight. Men who stood together a year ago now avoid each other's eyes. Old allies turn into rivals with barely a word spoken. Scarfo's influence seeps into every corner, even before he formally takes the reins, and the old days of cautious diplomacy are fading into memory. Harry Riccobene doesn't plant himself firmly in any camp yet. He's seen enough upheaval to know that picking the wrong side too soon can shorten a man's life. Instead, he works the edges, attending meetings where he's invited, avoiding the ones where the invitations feel too eager. The trick, he's learned, is to never look like you're avoiding anyone. In the spring, Harry gets word that one of Bruno's old loyalists wants to see him. The meeting takes place in the back of a quiet cigar shop. The older man wastes no time. "We're going to need steady hands. It's going to get loud out there." Harry doesn't commit, but he listens. In times like this, listening is the same as gathering ammunition. You never know when the right detail will save you. On the street, smaller crews start testing their boundaries, running numbers, or shaking down businesses that were once firmly under another man's protection. Each small breach is a sign of the larger fracture forming. Harry watches the patterns like weather systems. Some flare up and die quickly. Others swell into storms that drag more and more people in. One summer evening, while walking past a narrow side street, Harry notices a man standing under a flickering light, watching him. It's not someone he recognizes, but the look is unmistakable. A silent measure of where Harry stands. He keeps walking, neither quickening nor slowing his pace, because in this climate, any sign of nervousness can be taken as guilt. Business continues, but it's no longer smooth. Even routine collections have an edge now. Harry accompanies a quiet earner on a pickup from a tailor shop, and the tailor, a man who's never had an issue paying, counts out the bills with trembling fingers. It's not fear of the man collecting. It's fear of who will end up with the money afterward. Behind closed doors, Scarfo's name carries the weight of inevitability. His reputation for sudden violence makes men cautious, but it also emboldens others to act recklessly, believing they're untouchable if they claim his favor. Harry recognizes the danger in that thinking. It's the kind of overconfidence that leads to hasty moves, and hasty moves in this world often end in funerals. By autumn, whispers of open war are growing louder. Harry hears talk of lists, names marked for removal, debts that will be collected in blood instead of cash. Many people still think that the violence will burn itself out quickly, but Harry has lived too long to believe in tidy endings. In his experience, once the shooting starts, it doesn't stop until the map of power has been redrawn completely. So what do you think? Does a man survive by stepping back, or by stepping in before he's pushed? For now, Harry stays in motion. He avoids lingering too long in any one neighborhood, declines certain invitations, and never lets anyone see his full calendar. It's not paranoia, it's protocol. The safest man is the one who's hard to pin down. Still, there's no denying that the world he knew under Bruno is gone. The rules are shifting daily, and the men rewriting them aren't interested in the quiet order Harry once thrived under. The storm is no longer approaching. It's here. The question now is whether he can navigate through it without being pulled under by the current. The first shots of the new era echo across South Philly in the early months of 1982. They don't happen in crowded bars or public markets. Scarfo's people prefer their messages neat, personal, and unmistakable. A man is found slumped behind the wheel of his car on a side street. Another vanishes after walking his dog. A third is shot in broad daylight in a quiet suburb. These aren't random. They're the pruning cuts of a boss establishing order through fear. Harry watches the city's mood change. Merchants who once joked with collectors now keep their heads down. Social clubs grow quieter, the laughter replaced by low murmurs and quick glances toward the door. Even in the coffee shops where Harry has spent decades sipping quietly, the air is different. Conversations stall when certain names come up. One afternoon, he meets Tony Marino in the corner booth of a nearly empty diner. Tony looks older, more worn. Over a plate of eggs and toast, he says, "The streets aren't ours anymore. They're his." Harry knows Tony means Scarfo, though neither man speaks the name aloud. In this climate, even casual talk can be fatal if repeated in the wrong ear. Harry's role evolves again. Instead of simply relaying messages, he's sometimes asked to gauge the temperature of the streets. Who's restless? Who's lying low? Who's been seen with whom? He gathers this information without making it look like he's gathering anything. A question about the weather, a nod toward a mutual acquaintance, a glance at who walks in and out of a bar. Each small moment adds up to a broader picture, but Scarfo's shadow is long, and it doesn't take much for suspicion to fall on anyone. Harry avoids any suggestion of alliance with the Don's detractors, but he also resists being drawn into Scarfo's inner orbit. Men too close to Scarfo burn bright and fast, and Harry has no interest in becoming another name in the paper. One night, while walking home along narrow side streets, Harry senses he's being followed. He doesn't turn around, just adjusts his pace and takes a series of subtle turns. By the time he reaches his block, the footsteps are gone. Whether it was a test, a warning, or simple coincidence, he doesn't waste time guessing. The lesson is clear. Someone is paying close attention to his movements. His network beyond the mob remains valuable. A bartender tips him off that a known hitman has been drinking in a particular club for 3 nights straight. Never a good sign. A cab driver mentions a regular passenger suddenly changed his route to avoid certain intersections. These scraps of information keep Harry one step ahead, though he knows each step is smaller now than it used to be. The most unnerving shift is in the way disputes are settled. Bruno's era saw problems handled in sit-downs with calm negotiation. Now, Scarfo's world resolves them with bullets and public examples. The message is simple. There's no such thing as neutral ground anymore. Harry adapts by becoming even less visible. He turns down certain meetings, lets days pass without appearing in his usual spots, and keeps his answers vague when pressed for opinions. In Scarfo's Philadelphia, a wrong word can carry the same weight as a gunshot. By the end of the year, Harry knows the city's underworld is locked in a transformation that won't reverse. The quiet, ordered life he once navigated with precision has been replaced by an unpredictable storm. And yet, he remains on his feet, not by chance, but by instinct. In a world now ruled by fear, his survival depends on keeping his own fear invisible. 1983 arrives with the uneasy certainty that the bloodshed isn't a phase. It's the new normal. Scarfo's presence is everywhere, even when he's not in the room. His men, young and eager to prove themselves, move through the streets with a kind of restless authority, eyes scanning for any hint of defiance. Harry recognizes the pattern. Fear tightening its grip on the city, pushing men to act before they think. Harry adjusts his own movements to this reality. He staggers his routines. Different coffee shops on different days, no predictable routes, no fixed schedule for his errands. If someone's tracking him, they'll have to work harder to find him twice in the same place. It's not paranoia. It's the kind of discipline that's kept him alive this long. The year's first major shift comes when 2 mid-level earners, both of whom Harry has known for years, end up on opposite sides of a territorial dispute. Under Bruno, this would have been handled at a sit-down. Under Scarfo, it becomes a slow, tense standoff that ends with one man disappearing entirely. The message is obvious. Loyalty is enforced now, not negotiated. One cold February afternoon, Harry meets with a contact in the back corner of a wholesale produce market. Amid the smell of citrus and damp cardboard, the man leans close and says, They're watching you, Glasses. Not because you're a threat, because they can't figure you out. Harry says nothing, just nods. In Scarfo's world, being unpredictable is both armor and target. His old mentor, Tony Marino, is visibly struggling in this climate. The careful diplomacy Tony lived by is out of step with Scarfo's kill-first approach. Over a quiet dinner, Tony admits, "I don't know if there's a place for men like us anymore." Harry hears the defeat in his voice, but also the warning. If the game changes too much, even survivors can run out of ground to stand on. Harry's work remains subtle. He carries small messages, offers quiet counsel, and observes meetings without committing himself to the outcomes. His value lies in being the man no one can quite pin down, the one who seems to know more than he says, but never enough to make him dangerous. At least, not yet, but there are moments when the danger brushes close. In late spring, he's walking along Christian Street when a car slows beside him. The driver, a Scarfo loyalist he's met only once, leans out and says, "Boss likes men who pick a side. Just something to think about." Then the car rolls on. It's not a threat in words, but the weight of it sits heavy in Harry's mind for days. The summer heat only sharpens the city's edge. Murders come in quick bursts, 3 in a week, then a lull, then another flurry. Harry notes how the victims aren't always obvious rivals. Sometimes they're just men who knew too much, or had been around the wrong conversation. Scarfo's reign thrives on unpredictability, and that's what makes it most dangerous. Harry's coping mechanism is the same as it's always been: quiet observation, deliberate distance, and a refusal to be baited into quick decisions. He still finds moments of normalcy: early morning walks when the streets are empty, evenings with a book and a glass of wine. But they're rarer now. Fragile pockets of calm in a city where calm no longer lasts. By year's end, Harry is still standing, still walking that narrow line between involvement and isolation. Many others have fallen, not for what they did, but for where they stood when the tide shifted. Harry's not naive. He knows his time could come just as easily. But for now, the glasses still see clearly, and that clarity is his only real protection. 1984 rolls in with cold winds and colder tempers. By now, Scarfo's rule is undisputed, and the Philadelphia underworld has hardened into something sharper, meaner, and infinitely more unstable. The old rituals, quiet conversations to settle disputes, handshakes that meant the problem was over, are relics. The new law is immediate action, decisive and often bloody. Harry feels the shift in the air each time he steps outside. It's in the way corner conversations cut off mid-sentence when a stranger passes, in the longer glances over shoulders, in the subtle reshuffling of who sits where in a cafe. The city still moves, but it does so in jerks and stops, like an engine that's always a misfire away from stalling. He's called one afternoon to meet in the back room of a South Philly bar, the kind of place with a jukebox that hasn't worked in years, and a smell of stale beer that's become part of the walls. 2 Scarfo men are there, both younger, both with the easy arrogance of men who believe the current boss will be boss forever. They want Harry to keep an eye on a certain bookmaker who's been slow to pay his street tax. Harry listens, nods once, and leaves without agreeing outright. That's his way. Never committing in the moment, always buying time to think. Later, over coffee with Tony Marino, he mentions the request. Tony shakes his head slowly. "Don't get in between the boss's men and their money, Harry. If the guy owes, they'll handle it their way, and you don't want to be standing next to him when they do." Harry already knows this, but hearing it from Tony reinforces the rule: proximity is danger. As the months pass, Harry keeps his movements unpredictable. Some days he walks to his errands, others he takes a cab. He varies the cafes where he lingers, sometimes staying only minutes before moving on. This constant motion isn't just habit now, it's survival. Scarfo's reach is long, and the fewer patterns Harry leaves, the harder he is to catch off guard. The violence becomes more brazen. A well-known numbers runner is found in his car outside a grocery store, his window shattered. Another is shot stepping out of his front door, the streets still lined with kids walking to school. Harry absorbs these events the way he always has, quietly, without comment, but the frequency gnaws at him. This isn't just a dangerous city anymore. It's a city where danger is the default setting. One evening, he's at a small dinner gathering in a back room above a restaurant. The conversation starts light, but soon shifts to the reality everyone feels. Nobody knows who will be left when winter turns to spring. A younger man leans toward Harry and says, "You've been around longer than most. What's your secret?" Harry takes a slow sip of wine before answering, "I don't mistake movement for progress." The younger man laughs, thinking it's a joke. It isn't. By late autumn, Harry begins to hear something new in the whispers. A dissatisfaction not just with Scarfo's brutality, but with the instability it's creating. Business is suffering. The heat from law enforcement is intensifying, and even loyalists are starting to grumble. Harry doesn't let himself be pulled into those conversations, but he files the sentiment away. Discontent is like a crack in ice. It might look small, but it can spread fast under the right weight. For now, though, Scarfo still holds the city in his grip, and Harry, as always, is still standing, not untouched, not unmarked by the years, but present, eyes sharp behind the lenses, moving carefully through a world that grows more unpredictable with each passing day. By the start of 1985, the tension in Philadelphia feels like a drawn bowstring. Scarfo's grip is ironclad, but it's a grip that crushes as much as it holds. The streets are quieter in daylight, busier after dark, and conversations have shrunk down to half sentences and knowing looks. In this climate, every word spoken is weighed against the risk of who might repeat it. Harry adapts in ways most men don't even notice. He changes his walk, sometimes brisk, sometimes meandering. He shifts his seat in cafes, never sitting with his back to the door 2 days in a row. Even his reading habits are deliberate. A newspaper folded a certain way can signal disinterest, while one spread out fully can invite someone to interrupt. He uses these subtleties as social armor. One bitter January afternoon, he's called to meet a mid-level Scarfo loyalist in the back of a hardware store. The man wants Harry to smooth over a misunderstanding between two street collectors, but Harry can read the subtext. The so-called misunderstanding is a power grab in disguise. He listens, nods, and says, "Let me see what I can learn." It's a non-answer that gives him space to gauge the situation before stepping anywhere near it. In the weeks that follow, Harry notices a small but telling change. Some of Scarfo's most eager enforcers are being kept closer to the boss, not sent out as often. It could be a sign of tightening control, or a sign Scarfo doesn't entirely trust even his own circle. Harry stores that thought away. In a regime built on fear, mistrust spreads from the top down. Tony Marino is aging fast. When they meet now, It's often in near-empty diners during the quiet hours between lunch and dinner. One evening, over a bowl of soup, Tony mutters, "This city's eating itself. I've never seen it like this." Harry doesn't disagree. The body count is high, the money's less reliable, and the old sense of order is gone. That spring, Harry is approached by a businessman he's known for years, a man who's always kept a polite distance from mob politics. The businessman leans in and says, "I hear you're still neutral. Be careful. They're running out of patience for men without flags." Harry thanks him, but inside, he knows the warning is real. Scarfo's world thrives on absolute loyalty, and neutrality is beginning to look like defiance. In the summer heat, the city's violence swells again. A bookmaker is found beaten beyond recognition in a back alley, his only crime being slow payments. Another man disappears entirely, his family left with nothing but unanswered questions. Harry's response is to move more lightly, almost like a shadow. If he's seen it all, it's only briefly, in passing, never long enough for someone to think he's lingering. One humid August night, he's standing outside a social club when a younger soldier tries to draw him into a conversation about who might be next on Scarfo's list. Harry smiles faintly and says, "Lists change." It's enough to deflect without denying, and it leaves the young man with nothing to repeat later that could be twisted into disloyalty. By autumn, Harry begins to sense that the ground beneath Scarfo's rule is shifting. It's not enough to topple him yet, but there's a current of unease running through even his loyalists. The killings have brought heat from the feds, and the scrutiny is making the money flow less steady. In this life, interrupted earnings can be more dangerous than bullets. Harry stays the course, quiet, observant, useful, but never indispensable. It's the balance he's walked for decades, and in a city tearing itself apart, it's the only strategy that still feels safe. Whether it will be enough for what's coming next, even Harry doesn't know. Winter of 1986 lays a brittle cold over Philadelphia, but the streets under Scarfo's reign are anything but still. The killings, once spaced out like calculated punctuation marks, now come in bursts, clusters of violence that leave the city's underworld rattled and the neighborhoods on edge. For Harry, the pattern is telling. Scarfo is no longer just sending messages, he's reinforcing them over and over, as if afraid one shot won't be enough to keep men in line. Harry's movements narrow to the safest paths he knows. He uses back alleys not for secrecy, but to avoid predictable corners. He schedules his business in ways that leave him free to vanish for hours without anyone noticing. These habits, ingrained over decades, now feel less like choice and more like instinct, an animal's learned reflex for staying alive. One night in January, he's invited to a small gathering in a converted row house. The room is warm, the food plentiful, but the atmosphere is taut. Two men, both in Scarfo's good graces, sit across from each other, smiling too much, speaking too politely. Harry knows the look, men already imagining where the other will be buried. He keeps his mouth shut, eats little, and leaves before the cigars come out. In Scarfo's Philadelphia, the most dangerous part of a meeting is often after the plates are cleared. Tony Marino's health is declining. When they meet now, Tony moves slower, his once steady hands showing a faint tremor. Over black coffee in a nearly empty luncheonette, Tony leans close and says, "I don't like where you're standing, Harry. You're too close to the middle. Sooner or later, the middle gets crushed." Harry absorbs it without arguing. Tony's warnings have always been grounded in experience, And he knows this one isn't just about politics. It's about survival. That spring, Harry hears the first credible talk of dissent within Scarfo's circle. Not rebellion, not yet, but frustration. The constant violence is drawing too much attention from the feds, and the heat is burning the edges of every operation. Men are beginning to worry more about indictments than rival crews. For someone like Harry, who thrives in the quiet spaces between conflicts, federal pressure is a different kind of danger, one you can't read in a man's eyes. The first real test of his adaptability comes in June, when a Scarfo loyalist asks him to relay a message to a man Harry knows is on the wrong side of the boss's favor. Delivering it could tie him to the fallout. Refusing could be read as defiance. He chooses a third way. He passes the message through an intermediary, distancing himself from both the sender and the recipient. It's a small maneuver, but in this world, small maneuvers can be the difference between walking home and not walking at all. Through the summer, Harry watches the streets shift again. Certain bars go cold, no longer the lively hubs they once were. Others grow louder, riskier, as if daring the trouble to come. Harry avoids both. He prefers the half-empty coffee shops, the ones with chipped cups and quiet corners, where he can sip in peace and watch the door. By autumn, the undercurrent of discontent is stronger. Many people still think that Scarfo's brutality will keep him untouchable, but Harry isn't convinced. Power built on fear burns hot and fast. It can hold for years, or it can collapse in a single, unexpected night. So what do you think? Does a man like Scarfo stay forever? Or does the fear he breeds eventually consume him? Harry doesn't waste energy answering. For him, the only question that matters is whether he can keep moving when the next fracture appears. Because in Philadelphia now, fractures don't heal. They split wide open, and anyone standing too close is pulled into the break. The winter of 1987 arrives like a clenched fist. The snow muffles the streets, but beneath the white quiet, the city's underworld grinds forward in Scarfo's unrelenting rhythm. Bodies drop with less ceremony now. No warnings, no whispers in advance, just sudden absence. Men who thought themselves untouchable vanish into the cold without leaving so much as a trace for the rumor mill to chew on. Harry moves like a man walking on black ice. Every step is deliberate, every interaction calculated to leave no sharp edge that could catch someone's suspicion. He's always been cautious, but now that caution is sharpened into something almost surgical. He declines certain dinner invitations, not because of who's there, but because of who isn't. Absences speak louder than presence in this climate. One night, he meets Tony Marino at a diner that's nearly empty, save for the hum of the coffee machine. Tony's voice is quieter now, his breathing heavier. They're closing in on themselves, he says, stirring sugar into his cup. When a crew starts eating its own, the rest of the city's just a buffet. Harry nods, the truth of it already carved deep in his thoughts. The danger now isn't only in crossing Scarfo. It's in standing too close to anyone who does. Spring brings a shift that Harry's been expecting. Federal pressure intensifies. Agents are on the streets more openly, some blending into crowds, others making a show of their presence. Friends of Harry's from the fringes, bartenders, market vendors, start telling him about quiet questions they've been asked. The feds aren't just looking for Scarfo. They're looking for any thread to pull. And a man with Harry's longevity can look like a very old, very useful thread. He adjusts again, not in panic, but in careful increments. He trims his public movements, avoids known Scarfo haunts, and meets only in neutral spaces. Even so, he can feel the circle tightening. His name is still clean enough to move between certain factions, but clean doesn't mean invisible. In Scarfo's Philadelphia, there's no such thing as true invisibility anymore. The summer heat makes tempers shorter. A numbers runner. Harry's known for years is found in a dumpster, and the story spreads that he'd been holding back payments. Whether it's true or not doesn't matter. Perception is enough to sign a man's death warrant. Harry makes a quiet mental note. In this environment, being perceived as wrong can be worse than actually being wrong. By autumn, the atmosphere is dense with mistrust. Meetings feel more like interrogations, conversations more like coded tests. Scarfo's world doesn't just demand loyalty, it demands proof of it, over and over, until a man cracks or bleeds. Harry knows that staying on his feet will mean keeping his proofs subtle, never showy, never desperate. And yet, in the middle of all this, Harry finds a certain rhythm in survival. He's learned when to speak, when to leave a silence hanging, when to nod as if in agreement without confirming anything. The key isn't in having the right answer. It's in making sure no one remembers exactly what you said. Winter returns, and with it, the knowledge that the cycle is holding. Suspicion, violence, tighter control. But Harry also knows something else. Cycles eventually break. The real question is whether he'll be ready when this one does. By early 1988, the Philadelphia mob feels like a city within a city, one where the street signs change overnight and the weather can turn lethal without warning. Scarfo's rule is absolute on paper, but Harry can sense a subtle tremor in the foundation. Men still nod when Scarfo's name is spoken, but it's the kind of nod that says, "I'm agreeing because I have to." Harry has spent decades reading these undercurrents. He knows the difference between loyalty and survival compliance. What he sees now is the latter: forced grins, eyes that don't match the smiles, hands that linger too long in handshakes, as if to say, "I'm still here." For now, his own movements remain fluid. One week, he's spotted at a corner cafe. The next, he's halfway across the city in a hardware store office, drinking burnt coffee with an old acquaintance. Never too long in one place, never enough presence to build a predictable pattern. The unpredictability is his shield. One March evening, Harry is summoned, though not ordered, to meet a mid-tier Scarfo lieutenant at a private club. The man wants to know about a mutual acquaintance, a small-time earner who's suddenly been absent from his usual haunts. Harry's answer is mild. Haven't seen him. It's true, but more importantly, it's neutral. In this climate, even facts can become weapons if delivered with too much emphasis. Tony Marino's health is failing fast. When they meet now, it's mostly in Tony's dim apartment, blinds drawn, the air heavy with the smell of old coffee and cough drops. "You can feel it, can't you?" Tony asks one afternoon. "This thing's starting to rot from the inside." Harry just nods. He's been feeling it for months, the small cracks widening, the loyalty tested too often, the men watching each other like they're all suspects. The summer brings a fresh wave of paranoia. Scarfo's men start showing up unannounced at places they'd never bothered with before. Low-level bars, corner stores, even card games that were considered too small for attention. Harry avoids these spaces entirely, knowing that surprise visits are rarely just about checking in. They're about asserting control, about making sure everyone knows who owns the room. By August, Harry begins hearing a new kind of rumor, not about who's next to fall, but about who's quietly looking for a way out. Men are testing old connections, hinting at alliances beyond Scarfo's reach. It's dangerous talk, and Harry doesn't repeat it. but he listens carefully. Movements like this don't happen unless the fear of staying outweighs the fear of leaving. One night in early fall, he's walking home when a car slows beside him. The driver, a man he barely knows, calls out, "Boss wants to see you soon." Then he drives off without another word. Harry walks the rest of the way without changing pace, but inside, he's measuring possibilities. A summons can mean trust, or it can mean the opposite. And in Scarfo's Philadelphia, you don't get to choose which. He spends the winter maintaining his rhythm. Small, deliberate interactions, never stepping into a conversation that might pull him deeper into the wrong circle. It's a discipline honed over decades, and one that will be tested even harder in the years to come, because Harry can feel it now, the way a man feels a storm in his bones. Scarfo's reign isn't weakening because someone's attacking it from the outside. It's weakening because the inside is starting to collapse. And when the collapse comes, it won't be a slow crumble. It'll be a sudden drop, and anyone standing too close will fall with it. By the spring of 1989, the cracks in Scarfo's empire aren't whispers anymore. They're visible seams running through the whole structure. The violence hasn't stopped, but it's no longer the clean, targeted kind that cements control. Now it feels scattered, reactionary, as if Scarfo's men are swatting at shadows. Harry knows that when a regime starts fighting ghosts, the end is closer than anyone admits. Harry moves as though the city is one long chessboard. Each stop is a square he touches only briefly before sliding to the next. The aim isn't just to avoid danger. It's to never give anyone enough time to measure his intentions. In this climate, being read too easily is as fatal as being caught in the wrong place. One May evening, he meets a longtime contact at a corner table in a dim tavern. The man, a bookmaker with a reliable streak, leans in and says, "They're asking me about you." Harry's expression doesn't change. "What did you tell them?" The bookmaker shrugs. "Told them you mind your business. Always have." Harry nods once, but the comment sits heavy in his chest. In Scarfo's world, even a reputation for neutrality can be twisted into suspicion. Tony Marino's decline has reached the point where he rarely leaves his apartment. Harry visits when he can, bringing coffee and sandwiches, listening as Tony talks more about the past than the present. One afternoon, Tony says, "This life, it doesn't end for most of us. It just closes in until you can't move." Harry knows Tony isn't speaking in metaphors. He's describing exactly what's happening to everyone under Scarfo's rule. By summer, the atmosphere is dense with mistrust. Scarfo's circle is tightening, not out of loyalty, but out of fear. Men are more careful with their words, yet quicker to act violently if they think those words might come back to them. Harry sees fewer open smiles, more narrowed eyes. Even casual gatherings feel like interrogation rooms without the bright lights. In August, Harry hears from a dockworker friend that federal agents have been spotted taking long lunches near certain bars. The agents aren't hiding. They're letting it be known they're watching. It's a tactic Harry's seen before. Show presence, stir paranoia, and let the target do the rest of the work. One night, walking back from a short meeting, Harry notices the same black sedan trailing him for 3 blocks. He turns twice, takes a side street, and the car disappears. He doesn't bother trying to figure out if it was law enforcement or Scarfo's men. Either way, the lesson is the same. He's being clocked. He responds by cutting his visible routines even further. Some days, he doesn't appear in any of his usual haunts at all. When he does, He stays only long enough to be seen, then drifts away before anyone can draw him into a conversation that could be repeated in the wrong ear. By late fall, Harry can feel the balance tipping. Many people still think that Scarfo's hold is unshakable, but Harry sees the tremors, the men whispering in back rooms, the sudden drop-offs in revenue, the shifting eyes at meetings. So what do you think? Does a boss survive when his own crew starts calculating life without him? Harry doesn't waste his time trying to predict the exact day or hour. He focuses instead on keeping himself in that narrow, elusive space between visible and untouchable. Because if the collapse comes, and he's certain it will, he needs to be close enough to see it happen, but far enough to walk away unscathed. The winter of 1990 drapes the city in gray, and with it comes a strange stillness that Harry doesn't trust. Scarfo's Philadelphia is quieter now, but not because the danger has passed. Quiet in this world often means people are waiting, watching, readying themselves for the next move. Harry has learned to read the silence as much as the noise. The meetings he attends are shorter, the invitations fewer. Some of the men who used to fill the back booths of cafes are gone, either vanished entirely or keeping to places where no one knows their names. Scarfo's circle is thinning, and what remains is a mix of the too loyal and the too afraid. One January night, Harry receives a message, delivered through a man he barely knows, that the boss might want a word with him. It's vague, and vague in Scarfo's vocabulary is never accidental. Harry lets the message sit, making no move to answer immediately. In this life, rushing toward a summons can look like desperation, and desperation attracts predators. In February, Tony Marino passes away quietly in his apartment. Harry sits with him in those final days, hearing fragments of stories they both already knew. On the last visit, Tony takes his hand and says, "You always knew how to step sideways, Harry. Don't forget how." It's advice Harry will carry in his chest like a concealed weapon. By spring, federal heat intensifies. The news talks about indictments in vague terms, but the streets are more specific. Agents are flipping people, pulling on threads that have been in place for years. A bar owner tells Harry he saw a man who disappeared 2 years ago now walking into a federal building. It's enough to make everyone wonder whose voice might be on a tape next. Harry sharpens his movements further. No lingering in doorways, no casual drinks that stretch into hours. Every conversation is brief, every location chosen for its exits. It's not fear that drives this, it's discipline. Fear makes men sloppy, and sloppy men end up in cuffs or coffins. Summer brings an odd mix of heat and paranoia. Scarfo's most loyal enforcers act with even more aggression, as if trying to prove their value before the walls close in. Harry witnesses an argument in a back room over something as small as a misplaced envelope of cash. 10 years ago, it would have been resolved with a phone call. Now, tempers rise fast enough to make Harry step outside before the shouting stops. By autumn, word begins to circulate, quiet, careful, that indictments are not just coming, they're ready. Some men start disappearing, but this time, it's not the mob making them vanish. It's the government pulling them into protective custody. Harry notes the difference. In the mob's world, absence is final. In the government's, absence might mean a reappearance on the witness stand. One late November evening, Harry walks past a familiar corner and notices the shift. The usual watchers aren't there. The men leaning on cars aren't the same faces. The air feels like the pause before the trigger is pulled. Many people still think that Scarfo can weather this storm, that fear and loyalty will hold. But Harry knows storms don't negotiate. they only break what stands in their way. So, what do you think? Does a fortress fall faster from the outside or from the cracks inside its own walls? Harry doesn't intend to find out from the center of it. He steps sideways, just as Tony told him, into the margins where men like him have always survived, on the edge of the firelight, watching, waiting, ready to move before the heat reaches his back. The early months of 1991 bring the kind of tension that makes a city hold its breath. Indictments are no longer rumors. They're ink on paper, delivered with the quiet efficiency of men in suits and windbreakers. Scarfo's once untouchable inner circle is thinning, not from bullets this time, but from subpoenas and sealed evidence files. Harry moves through the streets like a shadow that's learned how to step around light. He doesn't linger in old haunts unless there's a reason, and when there is, he chooses his seat for the exits, not the view. The faces around him have changed, some younger, some harder, many unfamiliar. The turnover is fast, and the new arrivals talk too much, trying to stake their place in a structure that's already collapsing. One February afternoon, a man Harry's known since the Bruno years sits across from him in a cafe. The man leans in, eyes darting to the door. "They're asking about you," he says. "Not the street guys, the suits." Harry's reply is calm, almost casual. Then they're wasting their time. He knows denial won't stop curiosity, but it can slow it down. As spring arrives, the federal presence becomes unavoidable. Agents aren't lurking anymore. They're visible, parked outside certain bars, standing near the doors of clubs, making sure everyone knows they're there. It's a tactic Harry understands. Pressure without words, the kind that makes men crack from the inside out. Scarfo's loyalists, fewer now and more desperate, lean harder on everyone still within reach. Collections get rougher, conversations sharper. Harry watches one exchange outside a corner store. Just a few words between two men, but the stance, the clenched fists, the way one man steps back too quickly, tells him all he needs to know. Fear is doing the work now, not respect. In June, Harry receives a quiet warning from an unlikely source. A cab driver who's ferried more than one mid-tier mob figure over the years. "They're trying to box you in," the driver says. "Not the boss, his boys. They want to know where you'll stand if it all falls apart." Harry thanks him and makes a decision that night. He won't be standing anywhere obvious when the fall comes. By late summer, whispers of deals with the feds are everywhere. Men who once preached loyalty are suddenly unavailable, their families moving quietly out of familiar neighborhoods. Harry recognizes the signs. These are exits, not vacations. In October, Scarfo is officially indicted, and the impact ripples instantly through the city's underworld. Some men vanish outright. Others scramble to secure their positions in the vacuum. Harry doesn't scramble. He sidesteps. He avoids the gatherings where the loudest voices promise they'll hold it together. In his experience, the louder the promise, the quicker it breaks. Many people still think that Scarfo's name alone will keep him in control, even behind bars. But Harry's seen enough bosses fall to know the truth. The walls of power are made of people, and once they start moving away, nothing holds. So what do you think? Is a name enough to rule when your voice is echoing from a cell? Harry keeps his own answer locked behind the glass of his steady eyes. The city is shifting again, and as it does, he prepares, as always, to shift with it, without leaving footprints for anyone to follow. The winter of 1992 settles over Philadelphia with a gray heaviness, but for the city's underworld, the real weight is Scarfo's absence. He's not dead, just caged, his voice reduced to phone calls and filtered messages from prison. On the streets, his name still carries fear, but the echo is fading. Without his physical presence, the air has changed. Harry notices it in small ways first. Men who once spoke only in guarded fragments now linger in conversation a little longer. Old rivalries that Scarfo's temper kept buried start surfacing again. The vacuum at the top is drawing out the ambition in men who, until now, kept their heads down. Harry has no illusions about what this means. The absence of a strong central figure rarely leads to peace. It's an invitation for a scramble, and scrambles in this world are messy. He adjusts accordingly, keeping his radius smaller, limiting contact to those who've proven, over decades, that they won't turn reckless. One night in January, he meets an old acquaintance, Sal, a bookmaker with more caution than most, at a diner on Oregon Avenue. Over coffee, Sal says, "It's like the leash is off, Harry, but you know how that goes. When the leash is off, the bites get worse." Harry stirs his coffee, saying nothing, because he knows Sal is right. Freedom here isn't liberation. It's chaos waiting for a trigger. Spring brings a visible shift. Crews start flexing in ways they wouldn't have dared a year ago. A few mid-level operators try to expand into new corners without asking, testing how far they can push before someone pushes back. Harry stays far from those lines, but he watches closely, because the first pushback will tell him who's serious about claiming the top spot. In April, a message comes through a mutual contact. A high-ranking Scarfo loyalist wants Harry to be around more. It's phrased like an invitation, but Harry hears the subtext. "We want to know where you stand." He responds with polite vagueness, neither committing nor declining. The safest answer is one that can be interpreted both ways. By summer, it's clear that alliances are shifting weekly. A man seen at one table on Monday might be standing across from those same faces by Friday. Harry's strategy is to keep moving between these circles without being caught inside them. He's a visitor everywhere, a resident nowhere, but the streets are dangerous in a different way now. Without Scarfo's centralized control, disputes escalate faster, often without warning. A small debt becomes an insult becomes a shooting, and the shooting draws law enforcement that makes everyone nervous. Harry notices the pace of this violence. It's quick, but not precise. Men are making examples without thinking about the cost. In September, he's walking home from a late meeting when a car slows beside him. The driver, a man he knows by face but not by name, leans out and says, "Time to choose a flag, glasses. No more drifting." Then the car rolls on. Harry keeps walking, but in his mind, he files the encounter under escalation. Neutral ground is shrinking. Many people still think that someone will rise to restore the order, maybe even Scarfo himself from behind the walls. But Harry knows better. A kingdom without its king becomes something else entirely, and the men scrambling for the crown are already tearing it apart. So what do you think? Does a throne mean anything when everyone's trying to burn the room it sits in? For now, Harry's answer is to keep the same approach that's kept him alive through every shift so far. Move lightly, listen more than speak, and never be the last man standing in a room when tempers flare. By early 1993, the power vacuum left by Scarfo's imprisonment has become a living thing, restless, unpredictable, and dangerous to touch. Philadelphia's underworld feels like it's balancing on a narrow beam, and every step threatens to send the whole structure tumbling. Harry senses it in the rhythm of the streets. The cautious patterns of the past are gone. Now, movements are bold, sometimes reckless. Younger men who never learned the Bruno-era discipline act like the city is theirs for the taking. They're quick to make alliances, quicker to break them. Harry's seen this cycle before, and he knows it ends badly for most. He responds the only way he knows, by shrinking his visible world. He sticks to a handful of safe spots, never showing up in the same place 2 days in a row. His meetings are brief, his words even briefer. Every conversation is a potential echo, and echoes have a way of reaching ears they were never meant for. One chilly February night, he's invited to a small gathering above a restaurant on Tasker Street. The men there are all mid-level, none of them fully in charge, but all convinced they're one step away from being so. The talk is confident, too confident. One man boasts about running this town in a few months' time. Harry watches him with the quiet certainty that the man will be gone before summer. In March, Harry hears that an old contact has flipped, working with federal agents in exchange for protection. The news travels faster than usual, which tells Harry that the feds want it known. It's a pressure tactic. If one man can turn, so can another. He quietly increases the space between himself and anyone under suspicion. Spring brings a rise in street violence. Disputes over numbers routes and Shylock customers flare up without warning, sometimes ending in daylight shootings that draw unwanted headlines. Harry keeps his distance, but he notices the way certain crews are testing how far they can push before law enforcement pushes back. In May, he's approached by a man loyal to one of Scarfo's remaining lieutenants. The offer is framed as an opportunity. We could use someone with your steadiness. Harry gives the same answer he's given for years. I'll think about it. It's polite, non-committal, and impossible to use against him later. By summer, paranoia runs deeper than ever. The men still loyal to Scarfo see shadows everywhere, convinced the city is full of traitors. Others are too busy grabbing what they can to care who's watching. Harry sees both sides clearly, and he knows neither has room for someone like him in the long run. One humid August evening, while sitting in a corner cafe, he overhears two younger associates debating whether the glasses will eventually pick a side. One says yes, the other says no. Harry leaves without finishing his coffee. Better to be absent from a conversation than to let curiosity draw you into it. Many people still think that Scarfo's word from prison will eventually settle the chaos, that loyalty to the old boss can glue the pieces back together. But Harry knows fractured glass doesn't become whole again. It just cuts in smaller pieces. So what do you think? Can a man control a city from behind steel bars? Or is the city already learning to live without him? Harry doesn't answer that question out loud. He just keeps moving, stepping lightly from one shadow to another, making sure he's always close enough to see the shifts, but never close enough to be caught in them. The winter of 1994 brings with it the kind of cold that makes the city sound different, quieter, sharper, every footstep echoing a little too clearly in the night. Philadelphia's underworld is no different. The voices are lower, the looks longer, and every silence feels weighted. Scarfo's absence has stopped being an adjustment. It's become the permanent backdrop, and the power plays that once happened in whispers are now out in the open. Harry notices the shifts in faces more than anything. Men he's known for decades are gone, some to prison, others to early graves, and in their place are new operators with none of the old restraint. They carry themselves like the city owes them something, and they're impatient to collect. Harry knows that impatience is dangerous. In this life, rushing rarely ends in a clean landing. One January evening, Harry's at a diner counter when a man he's only met twice sits beside him. "You're wasting your time staying neutral," the man says without preamble. Harry doesn't turn his head. "Neutral keeps me breathing," he answers, then returns to his coffee. In this climate, clarity can be safer than politeness. The spring brings more visible fractures. Crews loyal to different lieutenants start clashing over territory that's been uncontested for years. A quiet sports betting operation in South Philly suddenly changes hands twice in a month, each time with a little more violence than the last. Harry stays away from those corners, but he notes how quickly stability has become a memory. By May, federal pressure is back in full view. Agents park outside social clubs for hours, leaning on their cars, making it impossible to ignore them. It's not just intimidation. It's a signal to anyone inside that the door out could lead straight into custody. Harry watches this from a distance, remembering how often the feds win by simply letting paranoia do their work. Summer is a heat wave in more ways than one. A mid-level earner with loose ties to Scarfo's old crew is found dead in his driveway, and within days, 2 more men disappear. The streets buzz with theories, but Harry doesn't add his voice. Theories are dangerous. If they're wrong, you look foolish. If they're right, you look informed, and both can get you killed. In August, he's approached by an old acquaintance now tied to a rising crew. The man offers Harry a seat at the table in a new venture, promising steady money and protection. Harry declines with a faint smile. "I've got my own table," he says, and leaves it at that. Joining something new means inheriting all of its enemies, and Harry's enemies list is already short enough to manage. By autumn, the city's criminal map is unrecognizable from the one Harry learned as a young man. The old guard is scattered, the middle ranks are unstable, and the newcomers are more reckless than seasoned. Many people still think that some form of order will return, that a single figure will step in to unify the streets again. But Harry's lived too long to believe in fairy tales, especially the kind told by men in back rooms. So what do you think? Is chaos just the absence of control? Or is it the natural state of things once the old rules are gone? Harry doesn't offer his answer. He just keeps his pace steady, eyes behind the glasses, moving through a city he knows better than most, but trusts less than ever. By early 1995, Philadelphia feels like a city with too many captains and no ship to steer. Every neighborhood has its own version of who's in charge, and the answer changes depending on who you ask and how safe they feel giving it. The result is a patchwork of control, stitched together by temporary truces and fraying at the edges with every week that passes. Harry walks through it like a man tracing an old map he no longer fully trusts. The landmarks are the same: street corners, storefronts, bars, but the hands holding the keys have changed. Some of those hands are steady, others twitch too easily toward a trigger. One cold February night, Harry finds himself at a small gathering above a grocery store, the kind of meeting where no one admits it's a meeting. The talk circles around money owed, territory blurred, and who has the right to collect where. Harry listens, saying only enough to acknowledge he's present. His silence, as always, is part of the currency. Men project their own meanings into it, and Harry prefers it that way. Spring brings a fresh wave of disappearances. A low-level runner vanishes after bragging about his connections. Another is found dead in a parked car with the engine still running. These aren't grand moves. They're maintenance killings, the kind that keep fear alive in the absence of centralized power. Harry files each one away, tracking the shifting fault lines without stepping onto any of them. In May, an old friend from the Bruno years calls Harry to meet at a quiet cafe in South Philly. The man leans in over the table, lowering his voice. They're saying you've stayed too far out for too long. People want to know where you stand. Harry smiles faintly. If they've been guessing this long, I must be doing something right. It's a deflection, but a deliberate one, enough to keep the question hanging without committing to an answer. Summer heat fuels tempers. A dice game in a back alley turns into a shooting. A dispute over a corner store's protection money spills into the open. Harry keeps his path narrow, avoiding the blocks where tempers have already burned too hot. He's seen what happens when you walk into someone else's argument. Sooner or later, you become part of it. In August, he notices something in the air. Younger crews are talking about expansion beyond South Philly, pushing into areas they've only heard about in old stories. Harry knows it's a dangerous ambition. Expansion without stability is like building a roof before the walls. Sooner or later, it all caves in. By autumn, the constant low-level volatility feels like the new normal. Many people still think that someone, anyone, will rise up to consolidate the streets again. But Harry knows better. Power now is less about holding territory and more about surviving the week without adding new enemies. So what do you think? In a city without a single king, is it safer to be a small player? Or does being small just make you easier to crush? Harry doesn't give his answer aloud. He just keeps walking his quiet route through a city that has turned into a shifting maze, making sure he's always close enough to see the exits and never so close that someone can block them. By 1996, Philadelphia's criminal landscape has fully transformed into something Harry barely recognizes. The old web of loyalties and understandings, delicate, complicated, but predictable, has been replaced by a looser, more volatile system where money moves fast, alliances dissolve overnight, and reputation can't be relied on to keep a man safe. Harry walks through it with the same deliberate caution he's always had, but the streets feel different under his feet. Corners that once belonged to men he knew like brothers now answer to faces that seem barely old enough to shave. These new operators wear their ambition openly, as if daring someone to challenge it, and Harry knows from experience that such men rarely last long. In February, an old acquaintance from Scarfo's middle years asks to meet in a small club near the waterfront. The man talks quickly, circling around an offer without naming it outright. Protection, partnership, maybe a bit of both. Harry sips his drink and answers with a measured, "I've got my own rhythm." In a room where eagerness is a scent predators can smell, Harry prefers to give off nothing at all. Spring brings another uptick in street trouble. Arguments over gambling debts escalate to gunfire in the open, and word spreads of shakeups in crews that had seemed stable for years. Harry stays on the edges, but he listens carefully. When a name comes up twice in the same week attached to trouble, he marks it as a place not to be seen near. By summer, the shift is impossible to ignore. There is no longer a single center of gravity. Instead, the city is a cluster of small competing hubs, each watching the others for signs of weakness. It makes for a dangerous kind of balance, one where the wrong conversation overheard can be enough to tilt the scales. In July, a friend from the Bruno era sends a quiet warning through a mutual contact. "They're asking about you again." Harry doesn't need to be told who they are. In a city this fractured, the question, which side is he on, never really goes away. It just changes who's asking. Autumn brings more movement. more faces disappearing without explanation. Many people still think the cycle will reset eventually, that a new figure will rise to claim the city. But Harry isn't convinced. Too many men now see themselves as contenders, and in a field that crowded, there's no crown, just constant fighting over who gets to hold the chair for a while. So what do you think? Is leadership still worth anything when no one believes it will last? Harry doesn't offer an opinion. He keeps his steps light, his appearance is brief, and his eyes always on the exits. In this Philadelphia, survival isn't about who you know. It's about knowing when to leave before the floor gives way. By the time 1997 settles in, Harry Riccobene is a rare thing in Philadelphia's underworld, a man who's lasted through every regime change without pledging himself fully to any of them. The city has shifted under his feet countless times, and yet he remains, walking the same cracked sidewalks with the same steady pace, his glasses catching the streetlights just enough to hide the sharpness in his eyes. The mob he knew as a young man is gone. The rules, the rituals, even the meaning of loyalty have thinned out into something looser, more self-serving. Power is smaller now, fragmented into pockets scattered across the city, each one guarded by men who trust no one and test everyone. Harry knows that in this new world, there's no such thing as a neutral corner. In February, he's approached in a narrow coffee shop by a man who once ran errands for Scarfo. The man makes an offer: light work, good money, a seat where you'll be safe. Harry shakes his head. Safe seats have short legs, he says, and leaves before the conversation can go further. He's learned that protection is just another way of tying you to someone else's enemies. Spring is a parade of small flare-ups, territorial disputes, debts called in too aggressively, sudden shifts in who's standing where at the back tables of certain clubs. Harry drifts through, careful to make his presence so brief that no one can attach it to a single side. He's still invited to certain rooms, but now the invitations carry an edge, as if people want to measure where his loyalties might lie. By summer, law enforcement pressure rises again. Raids hit small operations, but the effect is bigger than the targets. It rattles everyone, making even the most confident talk softer. Harry notes the shift. When voices drop, it means men are imagining the worst before it arrives. Autumn finds him in the same slow orbit he's kept for decades, moving, watching, letting the city show him where the heat is without stepping into it. Many people still think the old stability can be rebuilt, that all it will take is the right man to bring the pieces together. But Harry has lived long enough to see that the past never really comes back. What's broken stays broken. It just finds new shapes to hide in. So what do you think? Is survival just a matter of avoiding danger? Or is it the art of living inside it without letting it swallow you whole? For Harry, the answer has always been in motion. Constant, careful, invisible when it needs to be. And in the closing years of a century that's taken so many men off the board, he's still walking, still watching, still choosing every step, as if the next one could be the one that matters most. The streets at night have their own kind of hush, a soft, uneasy quiet that carries all the weight of the years behind it. For Harry, it's a sound he knows better than any voice, a rhythm that has guided him through decades of shifting ground. The cold settles into the cracks of the pavement. The glow of streetlights blurs in the mist, and the city breathes in slow, heavy draws. He moves through it without hurry, each step deliberate, his mind tracing the long thread from the South Philly corners of his youth to the fractured, unpredictable maze the city has become. The faces have changed, the rules have faded, but the undercurrent, the need to read the air before stepping into it, remains the same. In these quieter moments, away from the noise of deals and disputes, Harry understands his survival not as luck, but as the result of years spent learning when to appear and when to vanish. There's no triumph in it, only the calm satisfaction of still being here when so many others are not. The night air is cool, carrying the faint smell of rain. Somewhere in the distance, a door slams, but it doesn't quicken his pace. Harry knows that not every sound is a signal, just as not every silence is safe. It's the balance between those truths that has kept him alive. He turns down a narrow street, the lamps dimmer here, the shadows longer. His footsteps echo briefly, then fade into the hush. The city will keep shifting, the names will keep changing, and Harry will keep walking, quiet, steady, and unseen, the glasses catching just enough light to remind the darkness that he's still watching.